Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Data Champions Online Government. My name is James Bowater, and I am a production director here at Crinium, and I'm delighted to welcome you today. For those of you who have joined an in-person or online Crinium event before, welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome, and thank you for taking part. And we do hope that this will be the first of many that you join us for. Before we jump into today's content, I wanted to take just a moment for a couple of housekeeping announcements. Firstly, throughout the entire event, each session does have time allocated for our expert speakers to answer your questions. So do be sure to use the Q&A module, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit your most pressing questions throughout the session. So you don't need to wait until the end to submit them, just submit them as you think of them. And at the end of the time, we'll go through as many as we can and get answers to the questions that you would like to put to our speakers. We do also have some live polls during the session, so make sure that you take the chance to get involved here as well and vote. You'll be able to, it'll come up on your screen and you just select whichever option is most relevant to you, and we'll collect those at the end as well. In the unlikely event that you encounter any technical issues during the session, firstly, just refresh your browser and re-log into the system. Often that will fix the problem itself. If it doesn't work, you can use the same Q&A module to contact us directly. Just drop a message in there, let us know that you're having a problem, and we'll be able to assist you further. Just try a refresh and then use the Q&A module after that. You'll also notice on your screen we've got an array of downloadable content, and that includes our global online and in-person events calendars. So do download that, have a look at all the content, take a look, take it home, and read it in your own time. That's all for the housekeeping. So now that that's out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the event, Chandler McCann. Chandler is the General Manager and Chief Data Scientist at DataRobot's Public Service Practice. He and his team help federal agencies and the Department of Defense transform their analytics practices and solve some of their most pressing challenges using machine learning. Chandler has over 15 years of experience in data analytics and data science, and is also a founding member and head of AI for Good, powered by DataRobot, which is a program that helps nonprofits use data to create sustainable and lasting impacts in the world. Today, Chandler's going to be talking to us about how artificial intelligence will impact data and analytic leaders in government. So just a reminder, submit your questions as you think of them. And with that, I'll step to the side and I'll hand things over to Chandler.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon, everyone. As James said, my name is Chandler McCann, and I'm the Chief Data Scientist and GM of DataRobot's Public Sector Practice. And I'm very excited to speak with you today about a topic that's both fascinating to me personally, but also incredibly important to all of us as a nation. And that's how AI will impact leaders like yourselves in our government. With the exponential rise in data that's available to us, we're increasingly relying on algorithms and tools like machine learning and AI to process information and advance core business practices. But it's also created a national imperative to leverage these tools to stay competitive on the global stage. And we're in the middle of another industrial revolution with information. We have to ask ourselves, are we still riding our old horse and buggy, or are we getting on that new train? So at DataRobot, we want to help advance that, which is why we built the world's first enterprise AI platform to help companies and governments access the power of AI across our organization, analysts and data scientists alike. But after working through thousands of deployments with top companies around the world, we realized organizations need help with their AI transformations, which is why we combine our platform with a strategic partnership to help you reach your goals with AI and achieve success. So we've been doing this for quite a while and across the government and private sector, and we're the only AI native company that has from day one been founded by data scientists to automate AI for enterprises. And our team has grown, having over 600 data scientists globally and raising nearly $500 million in funding since 2012. Importantly, we've spent over 3 million man hours on R&D and have built the highest level of automation across the entire pipeline from data to value in the industry. And importantly, we've built in guardrails in our product for our users to ensure best practices in AI. So having seen what's possible, We have an ambitious vision, and that's to enable an AI-driven government, where AI is applied in every business process to predict outcomes, offering unprecedented scale, speed, and efficiency to compete in an ever-changing world. And that's not being dramatic. History is going to look back on this period of time as pre and post AI. And AI native companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook are supplanting legacy blue chip companies on the S&P 500. And there's no reason to think that this won't be the case at the national level. And we want to position the US to be at the forefront of that. Now, government investing is reflecting that idea. And there's a clear directive from the White House on down. And I think we can all agree that the opportunity is there, yet this is an ongoing transformation, and we're not close to where we need to be yet as a nation. Prior to my role in our public sector practice, I was fortunate enough to work with our large enterprise customers on not just AI projects, but also their AI transformation. And that's the mindset I'd challenge you to adopt as leaders. Not how do I implement AI projects, but how do I support a full transformation in my agency where every aspect of your business is benefiting from the data that you've collected through AI and machine learning. These same challenges, though, that prevent many private sector companies from realizing the potential of, the same challenges, though, that prevent many private sector companies from realizing the potential of AI, which amounts to getting left in the dust by their competitors, are also true here. And I'm going to talk through some of these today to help arm you as leaders and hopefully return back to your organization with a better vision of what you can do to drive transformational change. So first, we're going to cut through the hype and level set on just what AI is and where we're at today. Next, I want to spend some time discussing how we think about value with AI and where the opportunities are today, particularly in a COVID world. And finally, I want to land us in a discussion of bias and fairness in AI, what it is and what you need to know, what you can do as a leader, and what we're doing about it at DataRobot. So first, let's go into a poll. How familiar are you with AI? I think this is important to level set as we get into this discussion. I've noticed kind of a wide range of experience with AI, and as we go into some of these terminology and buzzwords, I want to kind of get a feel for where the audience is with their AI journey. Okay, we'll just give this a few more seconds here. Hopefully we got some fans of Westworld in the group. Okay, well, let's go on and look at the results. So I've built machine learning models before, about 30%. Okay, that's pretty high representation. I've heard of AI, but I'm not sure how different that is from BI tools like Tableau or Qlik. Okay, that's not too unexpected. I like Westworld, but don't really understand what AI actually is or what's realistic. That's good. And you know what? By the end of the day, all of you are hopefully going to know a little bit more about AI and what we can do with it. So we're inundated, right, with media hype and buzzwords around AI and machine learning. And unless we take a moment to organize these terms into some sort of framework, it's really hard to have a focused conversation on any one of them. So let's start off with the most important one. What is artificial intelligence? It's probably one of the more misunderstood buzzwords out there. So is it the Terminator or maybe Westworld more recently? Elon Musk might feel this way, but I don't think we're there yet, right? So just what is AI really itself? Simply, AI is systems that are systems that are able to perform tasks that ordinarily require human intelligence. It's simple as that. And I'm going to define machine learning as a subset of AI that is really any method that takes a set of examples from the past and builds a model to make predictions in the future. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And I want to highlight deep learning because it has a lot of excitement in the media, and some perceive it as the best type of machine learning. But like all methods out there, there's some problems with it. And for some problems, it's better than others, right? Specifically, when you have unstructured data, like images or voice files or text, it's great. It can be great at recognizing objects or faces in a picture. So for example, a deep learning algorithm can do a really good job of identifying what objects are in a picture. It's a cat or a dog, a hot dog, not hot dog, famously from Silicon Valley. But for most business problems, we're not using images or voice files. We're using tables of data, rows and columns. So these methods may be more boring with vanilla machine learning, but they end up being more powerful for what we need. Now, as you might expect, there are multiple dimensions to AI, and what we see in the movies tends to lean towards what we call artificial general intelligence, where machines have the capacity to understand or learn any intellectual task that a human being can, even if they're faced with something unfamiliar, right? So think of if the Terminator was self-aware, or the liberated minds of the bots in Westworld. Now, artificial narrow intelligence is what I consider and what I think generally is understood to be the current state of the art. And while some of what is possible with artificial narrow intelligence, which is just being specialized in one area, seems superhuman, I don't think we've quite reached the level of AGI yet, and I'm just not sure when we will. So what are some examples of these? Now, some of these are really pretty amazing if you think about where we've come in the last few years. Specifically, computer vision and natural language processing have benefited incredibly from a technique called transfer learning. So that's really leapfrogged our ability, particularly with text in the last year, to build very powerful models and make those available to the general public. We've also got things like physical robotics and autonomous vehicles. These are all examples of systems of models that are working together in conjunction to perform a task, in this case, driving for autonomous vehicles. But at the core of all these is still machine learning, which is effectively the building block of AI. And I'd say the vast majority of business problems can be solved with vanilla machine learning. And that would be where I'd expect most of you to spend 95% of your focus as a business. So let's try to put this all together. And this isn't a comprehensive mapping. No mapping is going to be perfect. But I do think it shows the ways that data is used within organizations. So let's start by looking across the top. And we have this spectrum from descriptive to prescriptive analytics. And in the schematic, there's three primary categories here. On the top left, you'll notice business intelligence, then artificial intelligence in the middle, and then finally automation on the bottom left there. So for people who answered our poll, BI helps you answer this question of what happened, right? So looking backwards, sort of that classic rear view mirror look, and it lacks the prediction element that comes with machine learning. So there's probably many BI tools you might recognize, such as Click or Tableau. And increasingly, you're probably seeing a lot of these tools partnering to put predictive insights into their dashboards. Artificial intelligence helps us understand what will happen. And this is really forward-looking, right, in terms of the decisions it makes. So machine learning, again, it learns from patterns of the past and then uses those patterns to predict into the future. Now, if you look down to the bottom left, you'll see automation. And this is simply something that automates a physical task. And robotic process automation is a great example of this. But this doesn't necessarily introduce any thinking here, right? This could be based on rules. And when you hear tools like UiPath or Automation Anywhere, they fall into this category. But you can see I put an overlap with automation and machine learning, since we're starting to see this increasing integration of AI capabilities with RPA to create intelligent automation. So for example, let's say I have an RPA tool that can open an email, a machine learning model that can classify what department it needs to go to, and then the RPA tool, again, routes that to the correct place, right? So it's an example of intelligent automation, and we see a big rise there. But I want to point you to what I've highlighted in yellow, and that's machine learning. And again, the reason is this is where the vast majority of you should be focusing your time. So again, these might be vanilla use cases, but there's a ton of value in these. If you can improve all of your processes by 10 or 20%, what's that worth to you? And these could be something as simple as predicting if a payment is going to be delayed or not. They add up to a lot of value in your organization. So that begs the question then of, how do we capture value and think about value with AI and machine learning? So you're really going to build a model for one of three reasons, right? First, you're going to automate a process, optimize a process, or produce actionable insights. So an example of automation is fraud detection. Was this transaction fraudulent or not, right? I'm automating the decision around scoring that as fraudulent. Another good example of optimization is price optimization. Airlines are great at this, although it's been quite a while since any of us have been on a plane. But your airline ticket seats are a good example of optimization. And then finally, producing actionable insights. So for example, if you have a employee retention model, what's the probability of someone leaving? You could get insights about telling you what might be the top reasons for them departing, right? So this is going to take us to our second poll. And we want to talk about how your agency can benefit from AI. So how AI-driven is your organization? And when we think about AI-driven, we think about how many models you have in production. So this could be 5, less than 5. It could be, we're just thinking about it. Give it one more second. Okay. Less than 5 models in production, they may or may not be driving value. Okay. Well, it seems like everyone's on their journey, and that seems to fit the bill. And I guess it sounds like there's just more opportunity to get value out of AI. And this is important. I think that's actually a good thing that we're talking about it, because we're in a unique time as a nation, right? The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the world, particularly the US, in numerous ways. And at DataRobot, we're working diligently with government partners to combat the epidemic. I'm very proud of that. But the fight goes on, and the reality is that the cost of this fight is huge. And we've spent trillions to fight COVID, as we should. But that drives a continuing need going forward to increase efficiencies, drive savings, especially with the potential of reduced budgets or changes to budgeting priorities. This has never been more important to drive efficiency. On the right, we have an image of the PLA at the Chinese Communist Party at their keyboards, at their screens, because, of course, China has advanced dramatically in the recent years, with their civil military fusion, their China 2025 strategy, to promote their interests throughout the world. And this idea that AI is a critical enabling technology is something we can all agree on, and it's going to be part of the national security equation going forward. And when it comes to AI competition, there's no such thing as second place. And this is something that the U.S. must and should be dominant in, along with our other like-minded partners in the world, and own the space, not just use it, but protect it from the manipulation and leverage other nations may try to impose on us. So it's one thing to play defense, but it's much more effective here to play offense and continue to invest in AI. All this is to say is that it's incumbent on leaders to adopt a sense of urgency to increase our AI proficiency so that we aren't left behind. And I think this sense of urgency is reflected in our published guidance, be it from the JAIC or the National Defense Strategy, the National Security Commission. They're all talking about, are pointing in a clear direction. How do we accelerate AI adoption? We need to develop an AI literate workforce and deliver AI solutions for our critical missions. But there's, of course, the reality, and that could be reflected in the poll numbers, that adopting AI has some challenges to it. Specifically, we see a lot of common trends. So organizations might be sort of dipping their toe in the pool, exploring AI as opposed to getting real value out of it. Some execs identify problems with people and processes, right? Or there's misaligned efforts. So maybe the AI effort doesn't align with priorities. So a lot of people are trying to adopt AI. However, few have it fully embedded. And that's really not surprising when you think about the people that are involved in delivering an AI project, right? So when we think about what it takes to deliver an AI project, it's like a funnel, right? So it starts with ideas where you have business leaders, your data scientists, in a perfect world, your whole team generating where are the opportunities. We think about which ones are actually valuable and feasible. And then you have to go into modeling. From there, you have to go into piloting them. From there, hopefully there's some validation process going on internally. And then the business has to adopt it. And ultimately, this is a change management issue to implement these things. And at the very end is mission saving. So, one key point, executive sponsorship is the main driver of making this work. And I charge you to take that back to your organization. But the truth is, this is many roadblocks along the way. And a lot of the ways that this encounters errors is on the front of the funnel. When it comes out, where do I start? So one really powerful tool that we've seen work with our customers is building an AI roadmap, right? So start with your pain points. Think about which use cases are going to matter to you, and there's really two important dimensions. So there's what is the value of this use case? Maybe it is mission critical, right? Or it's going to save us a ton of money. But that must be compared against how feasible is this use case. So is it going to take me 3 years to get the data together, or does the data even exist? So there's a balance of quick wins and long-term objectives that need to be put into your AI roadmap. And we've seen a lot of people be very successful with this, and it helps you as a leader drive down your priorities. That said, so tailoring this to your org is fantastic, but there's still some low-hanging fruit, and I want to share a few ideas with you. So first, within cost savings, I think I'm not going to go through all of these, particularly in demand forecasting and supply chain. There have been a ton of advances. So if you're still using Excel to think about your supplies a few years or months down the road, there's more modern techniques. And we recently worked with one of the world's largest distributors to improve their Black Friday forecast from 65 to 95%. And we did that in 2 months, not 2 years. So there's a lot of opportunities here. In human resources, beyond just looking through resumes, we can help leverage the trove of HR data that's come around the last few years to think about, selecting people for different programs, right? So who might make sense to go through a special training program? Who might make sense to go on a certain career path where they might need more exposure to certain skills? So there's a lot of creative ways you can leverage HR information. And then finally, cybersecurity. I continue to be amazed at the amount of alerts that organizations face when it comes to threats to their system. So some agencies report millions of alerts per day. So being able to reduce the signal to noise ratio there is very powerful. And I consider that a use case that could be applicable across almost any government agency that's out there. So these are some examples of, kind of low-hanging fruit. But the message that you need to take back to your organization is that there are hundreds of use cases for AI, right? It's not a handful. We can't think about having AI projects, right? We need to embrace this idea that the AI can be the fuel of your agency, and there's opportunities to leverage it all over the place. And last quick point, a key enabler is improving AI literacy in your organization. So you need people on your teams who are close to your mission to be able to spot opportunities for AI, and they can't do that if they aren't aware of what it is. So this is a huge driver when we see people successfully transforming their org. And on top of that, IT reform, I think it goes without saying, and I know there's a session later on that. That's another key enabler for this process. Okay, so we talked about value. Let's go into our last poll here. Shifting gears a little bit, how many ways can you measure bias and fairness in machine learning algorithms? A little different flavor. If you can't tell by the framing, it's obviously more than one. We're going to go ahead for the sake of time and keep moving here. And survey says, okay, no answers. Well, it will be revealed. We'll go through this. I want to pivot now to talking about bias and fairness in ML. So, before we talked about how you can drive value, but AI is a powerful tool, and like any powerful tool, it needs to be used carefully. So just to level set on and reiterate around the basics before we dive into this, machine learning is a two-stage process, right? So I have to learn from historical examples learn the patterns of what happened. And then once I know those patterns, I can make predictions on new data in the future, right? The challenge is that sometimes you can encode bad behavior in the past that you may not want to propagate forward. And that can be a very, very subtle thing to address. In addition to that, many things can go wrong when it comes to breaking trust with your models. And I say trust because I think it's a bigger issue than just bias and fairness. It's about trusting your AI systems. So for example, it's very easy to make bad predictions from inaccurate models. Models drift over time, so they should be monitored over time. And if your data that you built your model on changes, your predictions are no longer relevant. And then finally, there's the road of unintended consequences with bias and fairness. So the truth of the matter is, trusting your AI is even more complex than just that one dimension. Those are all common failure modes, but to really trust your AI, you have to trust its performance, its operations, as well as its ethics. And those are all key components. And that could be a tall order for data scientists or even a team of data scientists. But as leaders, it's very important for you to understand these dimensions so that you can ask your team and inquire what you're doing across these three pillars. So this sort of begs the question again, how do I trust a complex AI system? Well, I think there's three parts. First, understanding, right? So what hazards are present, right? Second, what action is my AI system taking, right? So can we put guardrails in place to mitigate hazards? And importantly, does it tell me the likelihood something bad is going to happen, as well as the severity? And third, we need to think about narratives. How do we communicate risk to both the people building the models and also the people consuming those models, right? And at DataRobot, we have a dedicated team of data scientists and engineers working to ingrain this into our platform and build these protections out. And this team has a very specific mission. That's to build the world's most trusted technology and the world's first robust governance framework for AI. And again, so this team's trusted AI. They're doing some great work, and we're really excited about what we're putting out. And again, it goes back to, though, we're in a changing world, and we feel it's the obligation of software companies and builders of AI to take this into account. So, we're engaged in some very important discussions right now about race, about justice, about fairness. And when we talk about policing, we talk about law enforcement, we talk about government with respect to constitutionally protected activities like the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. You have to understand the way in which bias and fairness play a role. And as governments rely more and more on technology, which is inevitable, and as police forces and law enforcement rely more on technology to do their work, there's going to be important questions about bias and fairness in AI. And I strongly feel it's incumbent on the companies supporting the government with AI software and data scientists to build custom solutions for the government to not only speak to this, but to design with purpose mechanisms to prevent unwanted behavior from our AI tools. And we've already seen with coronavirus that it's disproportionately affected communities of color, the Latino community, African American community. And as we look to technology to support activities like providing resources to them, providing resources to those communities, contact tracing, we need to make sure we're building systems that don't infringe on civil liberties or negatively impact those communities. One final point here, there's 32 bills that come up when you search congress.gov for algorithmic bias. So Congress is focused on this, and it's not a matter of if, but when legislation comes. So as practitioners, we need to work with the legislators, and we at DataRobot are, to kind of inform them of the challenges and risks ahead. So that conversation must continue, and we've all seen these headlines, and no one wants to be another story here. But even large companies struggle with AI and bias, right? In 2019, Facebook was prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for violating the Fair Housing Act. So Facebook's very profitable advertising business was deliberately targeting ads according to gender, race, and religion, which are protected classes. So for example, roles in nursing or secretarial work were suggested primarily to women, while ads for janitors and taxi drivers were shown to a higher number of men, in particular minority backgrounds. Additionally, the algorithm learned that ads for real estate would get better engagement stats when shown to white people, resulting in them no longer being shown to minority groups. So, the issue here is, again, how machine learning works. The algorithm found patterns in the data, but those patterns reflected existing societal inequalities that, left unchecked, would have propagated even further. So this is an example of encoding historical bias or tainted examples, but there are many other ways that bias can creep in. So our data set may not be representative of the true population, right? And thus not reflect the real world. Our data can have limited features for certain groups. Data can also be unreliable. And a very common issue is proxies, right? So zip codes classically are strongly correlated to demographic features such as race. So they can sneak into your models and can cause a lot of challenges. So I know we're getting close to time, and just a few more slides here. The question is, what can you do about it, right? So as we think about how we address bias, there are techniques, and how to do these is beyond the scope of this presentation, but you should be aware as a leader that they exist. And they come in the form of pre-processing, which is changing your data to not be related to those protected attributes. In processing, where you actually change your model to balance for those. And then post-processing, we're actually changing your predictions to avoid discriminations, right? And so in DataRobot, we're today you can take action to find these protected attributes in your data. I won't go through all these, but I do want to point out that, as I mentioned before, we're building this into our roadmap to where users can select a fairness metric that they want their models evaluated on, evaluate and debug their models for insights related to sources of bias, and eventually even mitigate bias right in the platform. So all guided so our users can make informed decisions that are relevant to their mission, and importantly, leveraging automation and building this awareness directly into the product. So we've talked about where bias comes from, what to do about it. And to answer your quiz question, it's important to understand that there are lots of ways to measure it. So how do you go from wanting to be unbiased and fair to actually doing so? Well, the answer is there's no good answer. At DataRobot, we've landed on 11, which we think account for the majority of the use cases our customers we've interviewed and across our research has identified, but it can go as high as 30 in the academic literature. So the point is, these can be more or less relevant depending on the problem you're trying to solve. And it's important to understand that sometimes they conflict. And it's not good to assume that if you're okay in one of these, that you're okay in all. And in fact, sometimes that's impossible. So this really comes down to building an AI to encode your values, be it personal or legal. And there's no way to satisfy these, again, at the same time. So you have to ask yourself, as we leave from here, what does fairness mean to your organization? There are legal elements to this, such as the Fair Housing Act and the other laws protecting certain attributes, as well as the cost of error, the cost and the trade-off of building in fairness into your models, right? So all this to say is that it's use case dependent on what makes sense when it comes to bias measures, and that's something you have to be thoughtful and deliberate with when building out your AI systems. So as we come home, this brings us full circle to what we feel is incumbent on AI companies to actively work towards. So bias and fairness are a hugely important part of a bigger discussion around trust in AI systems in general. And at DataRobot, we're going to extensive links to make our users and consumers aware of bias and to help make responsible modeling choices. So it's particularly relevant. The CDC has publicly stated that the burden of sickness and illness has disproportionately affected African Americans and Latinos and people of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So trustworthy predictive models can help here with forecasting and helping mitigate some of the bias in the data. And by trustworthy, I mean actually being able to adjust the modeling process or even operationalize it, even through changing of the data itself. So ultimately, there's ways to improve predicted outcomes across these sensitive classes, and we want to strive towards that. So ultimately, we feel automation is the key here, and DataRobot has a significant commitment to trust. And we published a lot of content on this topic, which is on our blog, and I encourage you all to check it out. But if you aren't using an automated system, this is a discussion that you can and should be having with your modeling teams. So I want to end with a call to action. First, AI is more accessible than ever. So you need to build AI-driven organizations to stay competitive globally. It's an imperative for our nation. To do so, you really need to train your organizations and drive AI literacy. And don't forget that there are hundreds of use cases abound in your organization. And finally, bias, fairness, and trust are very real and sometimes very subtle situations. And anyone who's building models for you should be able to speak to that. And if you aren't asking, I encourage you to. So that is my presentation today. Thank you for your time, and I guess we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Chandler. That was a really, really insightful talk. And I thought the piece around the ethics of AI and ensuring that you've got fairness in there and removing bias, particularly interesting and relevant as well. If you do have questions for Chandler, please use the Q&A module that you'll see on your screens. Open that up, type in your question, hit enter, and it will come through to us, and we'll get through as many of those as we can in the time we have left for this session before the panel. So the first question we have through for you, Chandler, is you reviewed how to address bias, but what about transparency? How can AI make sense if you aren't a data scientist?
That's a great question. So, we think that transparency, first off, is possible. And I think that there has been a perception that machine learning models can be black boxes. And, that's just not the case anymore. There have been so many advances in interpretability that you should be able to understand what features are driving your model, what about those features are driving your predictions, and even at the record level, what is making a certain prediction either increase or decrease in probability. So your team should be able to tell a story with your data and with their machine learning models. So the techniques are out there and they abound. So I would encourage you to look into tools like that. And within DataRobot, we use some common techniques like permutation importance, partial dependence, Shapley values, and the like. But pushing for interpretability, I think, is something we should all expect from our models and is a core part of trust in your broader AI system.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So the next question we have here is, do we need a data science team in order to effectively begin applying AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, I think if we reflect on do a data science team, so the short answer is no. And the reality is that I think the public sector faces the same challenges that the private sector faces when it comes to hiring data scientists. So a lot out an army of data scientists, and this time on work to hire 50 data scientists. What we've seen is at DataRobot, we've tried to build in all the best practices in data science from the time we start a problem until a model is deployed at a very high level of automation, so that we can let people bring their domain knowledge to and apply ML, machine learning to it. So, for example, I've seen a case at a bank where what we call a citizen data scientist built a model because of her business intuition and working with our team. And that was one of the most profitable models that they had made. It was worth roughly $300 million a year in terms of benefit from that one singular model. But this person had a reasonable background in analytics, and with a little bit of training and coaching, and our success team works with you to do that, it's very possible to have an AI-driven organization with few, if any, data scientists at all. So. I think I lost you, James. I'm sorry. I can't.
Sorry, I was on mute there. And I just said it sounds like a very valuable model. So yeah, that's absolutely great work. Another one we've had come through here is what steps can you take to improve your company's AI literacy? So you're talking about the importance of doing that so they can feed into the process. How can you go about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of options. So, I think with our customers, start with that. The easiest thing we do is we offer a full suite of DataRobot University courses, which are, ruthlessly practical courses in AI and machine learning that help people, again, apply their domain knowledge. And then from there, we also offer, we just announced our new 10X Academy, which is more of a data science bootcamp for people to go into the job market. But I think as leaders, the way to think about this is, what's our end goal, right? Am I trying to accelerate a team of data scientists that exists, or am I trying to broaden the overall acumen of my whole organization? And if that's the case, if you're trying to have more of a democratization and up-leveling in AI literacy, you really need to take a bigger picture approach of, first off, how do I raise awareness to AI and machine learning? And that's going to differ depending on sort of some of the key personas. Like leadership needs to be enabled to identify and support use cases, right? Analysts need to be trained on how to execute use cases. Your data engineering team needs to be made aware of how to integrate machine learning models into your existing systems. So you really need a holistic training approach for all those personas in your organization. And again, that's something when we talk about the platform and the partnership at DataRobot, that's something we're very passionate about in helping structure this transformation for you. So in addition to programs like ours, there are a ton of open source materials that are out there that are the MOOCs, the massively open source classes that you can take to kind of garner your interest. But I would urge you to look for a broader transformation and think about where you want your company to be or your agency to be in 6 months and 1 year, and go about it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Well, I think we've probably got time for one final question, and that is going to be, I know we have a data science team in our organization, but I'm not sure if they are automating machine learning. Do I need to get them engaged with you to explore AI, or can we talk directly? I guess that's a follow-up question to the data science team question we had before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you have a data science team, machine learning an iron. It's can get data scientists in 3 months. I can do that in maybe 2 weeks with using Autumn. So it's a way to scale your team's ability, and we promote this idea of automation first data scientists. So I'd rather spend more time thinking about what my model is telling me and the impact of my model to my mission than I would trying to debug code that is easily streamlined through automation, right? So, and I think the conversation has evolved. 3 years ago, there was a lot of resistance to automation, and we're starting to see a lot of adoption now in the data science community because they just realized that, you can do things you could never do before. So for example, at a large grocer, we're helping them automate the training of 1 million models per night, and that's done by a very small team. And that way, that's how they're doing demand forecasting on all of the SKUs in their stores. And that is just not tractable. It's very hard to do if you're just a team of data scientists. That's something that's actually very manageable to do through automation. So, when you have a data science team, you're in a good place. You've already got some smart people in the room. And from there, you can help accelerate their output and give them tools that they didn't have before. And particularly in DataRobot, we've integrated image analysis into our platform. We've integrated geospatial analysis into our platform. Text analysis has been there for a while. So being able to do all those at once and pull those data types in together really opens up a lot of possibilities that just didn't seem reasonable before. And we're happy to talk to you about that. Public sector at datarobot.com. Please reach out, and we'll love to follow up.
Absolutely, yeah. Do please follow up with Chandler if you have further questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time for the Q&A just now, so we'll have to end it there. But that was really insightful. So thank you, Chandler. And as I say, if you do have any further questions, I'm sure Chandler would be happy for you to reach out on LinkedIn and connect with him and message him any questions that we didn't have a chance to get through today. So all that remains for me to say is no, thank you, Chandler. I thought it was a really fascinating opening session to the event, to DCO Gov. And of course, I'm sure I speak for all the attendees when I say thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences and your expertise as well.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Have a great afternoon. Right.
Thanks.